Hey folks, welcome back to the shop where it is currently, give or take a degree, 10,000 degrees in here. Holy macanoli. I haven't done any of the insulation that I talked about. It's actually been a busy couple of weeks and it's going to go on for another week or so. But I couldn't film this in the house where the air conditioning is because of what I'm going to talk about today. And what I'm going to talk about today is what should you buy when it comes to tools. Now, this is not a what tools should I buy, but more what options should you be looking at. I have notes because I really put thought into this, and I hope you appreciate it because the brain doesn't always work in 10,000 degree temperatures. And so the question might be, well, why are you talking about this? Well, someone asked in one of the videos about miter saws, and it got me thinking, what things do I regret buying, or what things do I regret paying more for because I thought I needed that? Um, and so I thought I'd throw this around a little bit. There are hundreds of videos already on YouTube about what should you buy as far as what tools if you're first starting out. I take a different approach of it. What is woodworking? It's cutting wood and gluing it back together. Am I wrong? I don't think so. So what you're going to need very basically is you're going to need a way to cut wood. And if you're using unprocessed wood, you're going to need a way to process it. So we're talking about saws and a planer or a jointer or both. Okay. I prefer having both just because I don't know. We'll get into that later. You can use one or the other, or well, no, you can't use one or the other. You need to have a planer, but a joiner makes, anyway. The other thing I want to talk about is the fact that I do not believe in the buy once, cry once attitude when it comes to buying tools. And here's why. If you're just getting into woodworking and let's say you want to build things and sell them at craft shows. Chris, I meant to ask, how did your craft show go, by the way? Anyway, if that's your goal, if maybe you're going to use it for a side hustle, if you're waiting and waiting and waiting to save up money so that you could buy a big brand name miter saw, for instance, well, it's keeping you from building. Okay, so that's why I don't really believe in the buy once, cry once. Get what you can afford, get started, and then upgrade as you go along. Also, I will say, don't be afraid of cheaper tools. Now, I don't mean cheaper like in that sense, less expensive tools. Let's put it that way. Most of my tools, aside from my table saw, and I'm pointing here, it's right in front of where you're standing. Do you see it right there? It's right in front of you. Anyway, aside from my table saw, which is a Delta, we'll go into that later, all of my tools are either secondhand or they came from Harbor Freight, and I have a couple that I purchased from Wen, W-E-N. There's pros and cons to that, and we'll get into that in a little bit anyway. Anyway, my point is buy the tool you need to get started, and then upgrade from there. What I will say is, if you're going to buy from Harbor Freight, don't go below the Bauer line, because then you get into really tools that are going to break the second time you use them. They'll get you through the first time, they're going to break the second time. So again, this video is not about what tools you should buy if you're starting out. This is about what options you might want to look for depending on what you're using that tool first. So let's go over here and talk about a miter saw first. Okay, my miter saw is a Hercules, which is from Harbor Freight. It's a 12-inch dual bevel sliding miter saw. Okay, again, not a tool review. That's not what I'm going to do. This is the latest miter saw. Before this, if you remember, I had the Wen 10-inch, I believe, single bevel, zero rear clearance miter saw, which was a great saw, of course, until I dropped it. Before that, It was the 7¼ inch Craftsman contractor saw. It was a slider also. I still have that. That's the one that was given to me by a friend, and that's the saw that I'll never get rid of. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that for the average backyard, garage, shed woodworker, a 10-inch is probably plenty. Okay. I believe, yeah, you can cut through a 4x4 in one pass with a 10-inch. And again, for the average, weekend warrior woodworker, you're probably not cutting anything much bigger than a 4x4, right? I do like the sliding option because it gives you width. You can cut a lot wider, okay? I bought a 12-inch to replace the 10-inch because I use it occasionally to actually cut logs. Like if I'm preparing bowl blanks, that is step one for me preparing bowl blanks, is getting it at least to a point where I'm not killing my bandsaw trying to cut giant chunks of log off. So that's why I went with a 12-inch. I think the average person, can use a 10-inch and it'll be just fine. Now, do you need dual bevel and all of that? I can tell you that I almost never use the dual bevel option on this. In fact, I don't really use the bevel option really that much at all. It's just something that I don't use. Now, with that being said, if you're using it for things like crown molding, I can see where the dual bevel would be super duper handy. And that actually brings up another subject, and that subject is this. Is this a tool that is going to permanently be in your shop, or are there going to be times when it has to travel? Like if it has to go to a job site. And I say that because this particular saw is heavy. I mean, it's like super duper heavy. Either that or I'm getting weaker, which it could be also, but I would not want to have to, if you're using this saw for your home projects or your woodworking and for your daily work, I would not want to carry this thing every single day to a job site. It's just too heavy. It just doesn't make sense. Speaking of job sites, that brings up another subject. Are you going to be using a miter saw just for construction work? Because again, now I've never built a house. I've never framed a house. So I'm just thinking out loud. I would think the average work you're going to do on a house, a 10-inch saw is plenty. 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, whatever. Again, sliding, you get the width. Whereas, with a non-sliding, you're confined to what that blade is. Okay. But I think the average person who's using it on a job site, I think a 10-inch is fine. The Hercules also takes up a giant footprint. Like this, like you just saw the video where I had to reach out, redo all of this because this was so much bigger than my previous saw. And that's the drawback to a sliding miter saw, is it's going to take a bigger footprint unless you go with the 0 rear clearance. Okay, now that's another option. But just know, as nice as that is, a 0 rear clearance is instantly going to add money to the price. That's just the nature of the beast. Okay, so let's talk about table saws. Okay, the other option for cutting the wood, because that's what we have to do, right? We have to cut the wood so that we can glue it back together. Now, I prefer having a miter saw and a table saw. You could do it with one or the other, but you can't rip a board without a table saw. Okay, there is that. This table saw is a Delta numbers T2. Okay, that's what this one is. It's considered to be a 10-inch contractor saw. Although, again, I can't imagine dragging this out to a job site every single day. I just can't. They make better saws for doing that. And they're called benchtop models. They work great for that. It has its own stand that it came with, which for me is great because that means I don't have to build something to put this on. But again, options. What options when it comes to a table saw? For me, I think table saws have basically, they are what they are. Like the design hasn't really changed a whole lot when it comes to table saws. They are what they are. So what they do is they start adding things like options. Like, okay, you can get something with a micro adjust fence, or something like that. You can get a higher horsepower. You can get them with really high-tech safety features. You can get a 240-volt saw stop, okay, and spend thousands of dollars, or you can just choose not to run your fingers into the saw blade. I'm sorry, but let's be real, okay? That's what it comes down to. As technologically advanced as the saw stop is, and listen, I'm not tearing it down, okay? I'm not. I'm never going to buy one because I can't afford it. And if you are mindful when you're using your tools and you respect your tools, you should never need a saw stop. Okay. Now, again, for the average woodworker, I would say your basic table saw is fine. Okay. As long as it's well built. Okay. I probably wouldn't trust something that has a plastic body. And I can say that because the table saw that I started out with was a Black & Decker Firestorm. But it's flexible. Like I didn't really like that. So as long as it's well built and as long as it has a decent fence, okay, really that's what you need. Dust collection is dust collection. It's going to be what it is or what it is not. Okay, again, it's subjective. For the average woodworker, there's nothing wrong with a benchtop model either. If you're limited on space and it's just something you want to throw up on the bench, rip a board, put it back, whatever, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I prefer this one has a stand and it's already in place, and that brings up the other thing I talked about earlier, which is job site mobility. Is this something that you're going to have to take to a job site every so often? Because you have to take that into consideration. I'm not throwing this thing in the back of the truck and taking it 4 miles down the road to work on someone's house. There's no way. Absolutely not. So that's something you need to take into consideration. Is it a permanent fixture in your shop, or is it going to have to travel? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the planer and or jointer. Because again, if you're not buying pre-surfaced wood, you're going to need one or the other or both. Okay, so this is something else you need to think about. Right off the rip, what I'm going to tell you is I always say to myself, not to you, I always say to myself, if I'm looking at a tool, I always say, well, buy bigger than what you think you're going to need. Okay, that's just been a mantra of mine for quite some time, actually. And when it comes to a planer, they're pretty standard. Okay, let's face it, they're pretty standard when it comes to size. Like the lunchbox style planer is pretty standard. This one, I don't even remember what size this is. This is a 12.5-inch. Sorry about that. This is a 12.5-inch planer, and they're all pretty standard within probably a ½ inch or an inch. Okay, so with that said, this is a Bauer. This is from Harbor Freight. It is a two straight blade planer. Okay. For the most part, it does a pretty good job for me. Okay. I have run probably just countless board feet of oak through this thing. And as long as the blades are sharp, you're good. Not a whole lot of problem. As far as options are concerned, again, planers are kind of planers. I don't know that they're coming out with more high-tech options. But again, the more high-tech you get, the more expensive it's going to be. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. For me, when it comes to options for a planer, your options that you should consider are 2-blade, 3-blade, or helical cutter. Okay, that's really the options you need to consider when you're talking about this. Helical head machines are going to cost you more. Let's face it, that's just the way it is. In fact, I'm not sure if very many planers actually come from the factory with a helical head. If they do, if you know of some that do, let me know. But I know even the more expensive DeWalt ones, you have to change the head out. So a 3-blade machine is obviously going to be more efficient than a 2-blade machine, but a 2-blade machine is just fine for what I'm doing. So in the end, what it comes down to is cost. And what I said about the table saw with the plastic body, well, that's a plastic body. But you know what? It does what I need it to do. So in this case, I'm going to say okay, because everything else is steel. This is just sort of the cover. Let's put it that way. As far as the joiner is concerned, okay, my joiner is a Wen 6-inch benchtop model. Okay, it has a helical cutting head in it, and it came from Wen with a helical cutting head in it, and it was fairly reasonably priced, which is why I bought this. Okay, this is where size matters. Okay, sorry, but it does. It's just how it is. It's a fact of life. Size does sometimes matter. This is a 6-inch joiner. I used it twice and instantly wished that I had gotten an 8-inch. Okay, but even with that, some of the oak that I have, and there's a story behind that. I bought 540 board feet of oak, rough cut oak, not knowing what 540 board feet of oak looked like. So now I still have it. Anyway, some of it is upwards of 10 to 12 inches wide, and they're beautiful. But for me to process any of them, the first thing I have to do is run them through the table saw, get them down to 6 inches so that I can then run them on this. And now I know there are options that you can run them through the planer with a planer sled. And I've done that. But if you're going much longer than say 3 or 4 feet, like where is my planer sled? My planer sled is not that big. You'd have to get a substantially large planer sled to do it that way. You can, and it would work. I prefer both. Okay, so instantly I wish I had gotten a larger joiner, but when is enough, right? Do I go out and get a 12-inch joiner because I have some 12-inch wide boards? I don't know. At what point am I no longer looking at a benchtop model and I have to get a floor model? Okay, because I don't have the space for that. Okay, so these are other things that you need to take into consideration. This was very affordable. It cuts well. And again, I have run oak through this all day long. I'm not a tool snob. I'm not the person that's going to say, oh, the motor changed pitch whenever the oak hit. Well, you know what? That's what motors do. It still tore it up, man. It just ripped right through it. No problems at all. Okay. But when is enough enough? You know, 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch. When do I stop? So I'm just going to stick with this. One, because it works. One, because it's paid for. And one, because it lets me process the wood and get on to the part that I like, which is building. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up because I think it's gotten hotter in here since I came out here. But what do we say about all this? In the end, here's my wrap up on this. In the end, decide on what you actually need when it comes to the tools you're going to buy. Okay, is it going to stay in the shop? Is it going to be a permanent fixture in the shop, or is it going to have to travel from time to time? Okay, that's a consideration you need to take. Okay, is it too heavy to actually travel? Okay, is it going to do the things that you want it to do without you having to pay for extra options that you're not going to use? Okay, that's a consideration. I don't use a dual bevel on my miter saw. I don't. But you might. Um, yeah, zero rear clearance would be nice, but that one works okay. It just takes up more space. Okay. Um, Here's my biggest bit of advice. Don't get sucked in to what tools YouTube woodworkers have and don't have. And I say that because I fell into this trap. Okay. Um, Only to find out that they're talking about these things because they're getting paid to talk about them. I have a dowel jig that I very rarely use because I was told I needed one. I have, what else do I have that's a classic example of that? I have a biscuit joiner because I was told I needed a biscuit joiner. I very rarely use it. I have a basic pocket hole jig, but then was told that the other one is so much better and easier to use, but oh, by the way, it cost about another $80 more. So don't get wrapped up in the tools that YouTube woodworkers have and don't get wrapped up into brands. Okay. Don't be a tool snob. It drives me crazy when someone on YouTube goes out of their way to tell you that they are team yellow or they are team blue or they are team green. Okay. I'm not a team anything. All right. I am, is it affordable? Does it work? Don't get wrapped up in YouTube woodworkers tools. Okay. Um, what I'll tell you is get what you need, get what you can afford, and get started. That's what it comes down to. Get what you need, get what you can afford, and get started. You can upgrade later. All right, folks, I'm going to get out of here because it is blisteringly hot. It's actually cooler outside than it is in here, but I do hope that this helped. If you have questions, if I missed something, if there's a different tool that you want to talk about, um, throw it in the comments. I read and answer all my comments because I'm usually only getting 4 or 5, which is fine because that's manageable. But yeah, if you want to talk about a different tool like bandsaws or lathes or whatever, throw it in the comments and I'll see what I can do to answer you. In the meantime, thanks for hanging out. I'll see you on the next one. God bless.